if Meghan Markle ever returns to Britain, insiders say it won't be for Harry. Behind palace walls, whispers suggest the real tension centers on Prince William. Power, proximity, and optics. This isn't a love story. It's a battle over influence, timing, and narrative control. It started with a sentence that sounded harmless, almost throwaway. If Meghan returns to Britain, it won't be for Harry. But inside royal circles, that line didn't land like gossip. It landed like a warning. As of now, Meghan Markle has not returned to United Kingdom. There is no official travel plan, no confirmed visit, no palace invitation. Yet over the past several months, reports in both British and American media have suggested she may be considering a return, possibly tied to Prince Harry's legal battles in London or future Invictus-related commitments. Publicly, the explanation is simple and safe. If Meghan does return, it would be framed as supportive, diplomatic, or practical. Security concerns, family logistics, professional obligations. That's the version meant for lifestyle headlines and mainstream coverage. Privately, however, insiders suggest a very different conversation is happening behind palace doors. According to multiple commentators and royal correspondents, the name that keeps surfacing in these discussions is not Harry, not King Charles, but Prince William. That detail alone has fueled speculation, not as confirmed fact, but as a recurring pattern whispered among royal watchers. The concern, according to sources quoted in recent media coverage, is less about reconciliation and more about optics, proximity, and timing. One insider, described as close enough to understand internal thinking but distant enough to speak freely, suggested that if Meghan returns, the palace's primary sensitivity won't be emotional. It will be strategic, who she is seen with, where she stands, what images circulate, what narratives form. In modern royal culture, images move faster than statements. A single photograph can generate weeks of speculation. A brief shared moment can be turned into a storyline. And insiders say the palace is keenly aware of that risk. While none of the more dramatic claims have been confirmed, they haven't been firmly denied either, which, in royal media logic, keeps the speculation alive. What makes this rumor particularly unsettling to observers is the broader context. Over the past 2 years, many analysts have noted a quiet but undeniable shift in the monarchy's power structure. While King Charles III remains on the throne, Prince William's symbolic and institutional influence has grown sharply. He now leads more high-profile engagements. He represents stability to the public. He carries the image of continuity. And crucially, he is widely viewed as the monarchy's future center of gravity. As one veteran royal editor put it in recent commentary, if you're thinking long-term influence, William is the only calculation that matters. Meanwhile, Prince Harry's role has continued to drift toward the periphery. His visits to Britain are often tied to legal matters rather than royal duties. His presence appears increasingly procedural. Meghan, by contrast, has remained largely across the Atlantic, building her personal brand and shaping her public image from afar. To palace insiders, this imbalance matters, not because Harry lacks emotional significance, but because, as some analysts frame it, his relevance is personal while William's is institutional. And institutions, as history shows, protect their future first. That's why the very idea of Meghan returning, even hypothetically, has reportedly triggered what one royal aide described as quiet alarm. Not fear, not panic, but heightened awareness, the kind that leads to cautious planning rather than public reaction. Because from the palace's perspective, this story isn't about what Meghan might say. It's about what her presence might suggest. And in an environment where perception shapes power, suggestion can be more dangerous than certainty. But this rumor doesn't exist in isolation. The next question naturally follows. Why has Prince William become the focal point of this tension in the first place? Because to understand the anxiety, you first have to understand how power inside the monarchy has shifted and why William now sits at the center of it. And that's where the story really begins. Section 2. Why William is the real power center. Now, to understand why Prince William has become the silent focal point of the speculation, you have to look at how the monarchy's internal balance has shifted in recent years. On paper, King Charles III remains firmly on the throne. But in practice, Many royal observers argue that the monarchy's symbolic and operational weight has been drifting toward William, not suddenly, but steadily. Over the past few years, William has taken on an increasingly visible role. He has fronted major international engagements, represented Britain at high-profile global events, led climate-focused initiatives, and been positioned as a statesman rather than a supporting royal. His public image has evolved from heir in waiting to future monarch in motion. One senior royal commentator described it as a quiet transition rather than a formal one. Not a handover, but a recalibration. This is no longer preparation, one editor noted. This is positioning. In media coverage, the shift is subtle but consistent. When the monarchy is discussed in future-facing terms, William's name dominates. When stability, continuity, and long-term vision are mentioned, he is framed as the central figure. He represents not just the next chapter, but the direction of the institution itself. Meanwhile, Prince Harry occupies a very different space. His public role within the monarchy has diminished significantly since stepping back from royal duties. His returns to Britain are often tied to legal matters, court proceedings, or tightly scheduled personal appearances rather than institutional responsibilities. His relationship with the royal family, particularly with William, remains strained, distant, and largely unspoken. Several biographers and commentators have described the brothers' dynamic as being in a prolonged freeze. No meaningful public interaction, no visible reconciliation, no sign of a restored working relationship. That distance matters more than it might seem. In royal systems, power flows through structure, not sentiment. Emotional relevance carries weight in headlines, but institutional relevance determines influence behind the scenes. And by most measures, Harry's influence is now largely personal, while William's is constitutional. As one analyst put it bluntly, Harry matters emotionally, William matters structurally. This distinction explains why insiders say palace concerns, real or speculative, are increasingly oriented around William rather than Harry. If the monarchy is thinking in terms of optics, continuity, and long-term narrative, then William becomes a gravitational center by default, and gravity attracts attention. Within royal watching circles, there has been growing discussion about how narratives form when power concentrates in one figure. The closer someone appears to that figure, visually, symbolically, or socially, the more speculation tends to follow. This doesn't require scandal. It doesn't require intention. It requires proximity in a system built on symbolism. One former royal advisor framed it this way: when the future of an institution becomes embodied in one person, every interaction around that person becomes meaningful. That's the underlying tension. Not drama, not rivalry, but optics in a hierarchy where meaning is assigned to positioning. At the same time, William's public role has expanded in a way that reinforces inevitability. He is photographed more centrally. He is framed more authoritatively. He is increasingly presented as a steady counterweight to past turbulence. To many observers, this creates a clear narrative. William represents continuity, order, and the next era. And where there is a clear future, there is heightened sensitivity to anything that might complicate the story. That's why, according to speculation, any scenario involving Meghan's potential return to Britain is not being filtered through Harry's emotional arc, but through William's institutional one. Not because of romance, not because of rivalry, but because, in royal terms, William is where power, visibility, and long-term influence now converge. And once the reality is acknowledged, another question naturally emerges. If William is now the center of gravity, who understands how to position themselves around power better than someone who has spent years navigating elite social systems? Because to some analysts, this story isn't just about where power sits. It's about who knows how to read it. And that brings us to Meghan's past, and the patterns observers believe they recognize. Section 3, Meghan's pattern. Reading power and positioning herself. Long before Meghan Markle entered royal life, she had already built a reputation for understanding one essential rule of elite spaces. Power is rarely where people say it is. It's where influence actually flows. To many observers, her rise has never looked accidental. Not because of conspiracy, but because of what some describe as strategic social awareness, an ability to read rooms, recognize hierarchies, and align herself with people who mattered. One location often mentioned in retrospective profiles is Soho House, a private members club known for blending creatives, executives, investors, and media figures. It wasn't aristocratic in the traditional sense, but operated on a different kind of exclusivity, one built on access, visibility, and influence. A former entertainment publicist once described Meghan as very good at identifying who had real leverage in a room. Another journalist who covered her early career recalled that her networking never felt random. She gravitated toward people who could open doors, they said. In many industries, that behavior would simply be called ambition. In Hollywood, media, or business, it's normal. But when royal analysts examined Meghan's later trajectory, they argue that what looked like networking before began to resemble pattern recognition afterward. Not scandal, not scheming. Pattern. According to several commentators, Meghan has consistently shown an instinct for understanding where attention concentrates and how influence is structured. That instinct didn't disappear when she entered the monarchy. It simply collided with a system that operates on rigid, inherited hierarchy rather than personal momentum. Inside the royal institution, visibility does not equal authority. Proximity does not equal power. Influence follows protocol, lineage, and tradition, not initiative. That cultural mismatch reportedly caused early tension. Some royal biographers have suggested that Meghan expected a more dynamic role than the system was willing to offer. She assumed visibility would translate into influence, one author observed. But in the monarchy, visibility follows rank. It doesn't redefine it. From that perspective, her experience inside the institution may not have reshaped her instincts. It may have refined them. Several analysts argue that Meghan likely left royal life with a sharper understanding of how power inside the monarchy actually works. Who gets protected, who gets prioritized, who gets prepared for the future, and who, despite popularity, remains structurally peripheral. One former Palace Link commentator put it bluntly: Harry mattered emotionally, William mattered institutionally. To observers who track patterns, that realization changes the lens through which Meghan's potential return to Britain is viewed. This doesn't require accusations or dramatic motives. It only requires acknowledging a possibility. Someone who understands hierarchy may naturally pay attention to where real power sits. A media strategist once described Meghan's approach as adaptive rather than impulsive, not reacting emotionally, but recalibrating based on where influence is concentrated. From that angle, speculation about her future decisions isn't about romance, rivalry, or provocation. It's about strategic awareness. Royal watchers who follow this narrative often describe her as someone who doesn't chase status blindly, but instead tracks gravitational centers, the people or institutions around whom attention, legitimacy, and long-term relevance gather. And within the modern monarchy, those observers argue that gravitational center has become unmistakable. It's no longer Harry. It's William. That framing doesn't imply intention. It doesn't prove motive. It doesn't claim secret plans. Instead, it reflects how analysts interpret behavior patterns over time. Meghan, in this telling, isn't unpredictable. She's consistent. Consistent in reading rooms, consistent in understanding leverage, consistent in aligning with relevance. Still, speculation alone isn't enough to shape institutional behavior. But inside palace circles, according to insiders, concern doesn't require proof. It requires probability, which is why, whether or not these theories hold weight, the monarchy has reportedly begun preparing not for confrontation, but for containment. Because from the palace's perspective, the risk isn't what Meghan might do. It's how her presence could be interpreted in a system where optics matter more than intention. And that has triggered a new phase behind palace walls. One focused on control, choreography, and narrative management. Because if perception is power, the next battle isn't personal, it's optical. Section 4. The palace response. Containment, optics, and silent control. As speculation about Meghan's possible return to Britain has grown, insiders suggest the palace's reaction has been neither dramatic nor emotional. Instead, it has been methodical, quiet, and defensive, shaped by experience rather than impulse. This time, the strategy is not confrontation, but it's containment. According to multiple royal observers, internal discussions have shifted away from whether Meghan might return and toward how the institution would manage the optics if she does. The concern isn't rooted in fear, it's rooted in risk management. One Palace Link source described a mindset simply: we don't react to narratives, we reduce their oxygen. That philosophy appears to be guiding a behind-the-scenes tightening of protocol. Event planning, guest lists, arrival timings, seating arrangements, all reportedly receive closer scrutiny when high-profile royals are involved, not to create conflict, but to minimize interpretive space. In the modern media environment, perception often outweighs reality. A single shared platform, a momentary interaction, a photograph captured at the wrong angle. Any of these can spark weeks of speculation, regardless of intent. A former royal communications advisor put it bluntly: once an image exists, you're already playing defense. That's why insiders say the palace is now more cautious about proximity, sequencing, and symbolism than ever before. Who stands near whom? Who arrives first? Who leaves last? Who shares visual framing? These details may appear trivial to the public, but inside royal operations, they are treated as narrative architecture. This heightened sensitivity is shaped by memory. Several senior figures reportedly view the early Sussex years as a period of miscalculation, a time when the institution underestimated Meghan's ability to influence public narratives. At the time, some assumed goodwill and tradition would stabilize everything. It didn't. That experience appears to have hardened the palace's posture. According to insiders, there is now a stronger emphasis on predictability, boundaries, and narrative discipline. Not hostility, restraint. They don't underestimate Meghan anymore, one former official said. They respect her ability to shape storylines. That respect, however, does not translate into expanded access. Prince William, in particular, is said to embody this new posture. Sources close to palace operations describe him as polite, controlled, and deliberately distant. Not out of personal animosity, but out of institutional caution. Public warmth, insiders suggest, is now rationed, nothing impulsive. Nothing easily misread, nothing unscripted. And William is not alone in this approach. Prince William is often described as one of the monarchy's internal enforcers, pragmatic, unsentimental, and deeply protective of institutional stability. Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, is believed to play a quieter but equally stabilizing role, helping maintain internal cohesion and prevent mixed messaging. Even King Charles III, though described as emotionally conflicted, is widely viewed as strategically firm. As one commentator summarized it, he may want harmony, but he prioritizes stability. Together, this creates a system that is less reactive and more preemptive than in the past. There have been no public condemnations of speculation, and no dramatic denials, and no visible engagement with rumor. And that silence is intentional. According to former palace media strategists, arguing with speculation only amplifies it. Instead, the monarchy appears committed to doing what it does best, outlasting noise, maintaining composure, and projecting inevitability. But beneath the calm exterior, insiders admit the concern is real. Not because Meghan represents a direct threat, but because she represents narrative unpredictability. Institutions fear unpredictability more than opposition. They can manage criticism. They can survive controversy. What they cannot easily control is interpretation. That's why this situation, even without action, has triggered so much preparation. The palace isn't bracing for a move. It's bracing for how a move might be perceived. And as attention increasingly centers on William's future, another figure quietly becomes central to this defensive strategy. Because if William represents inevitability, the person who embodies stability beside him becomes just as important. And that leads directly to Catherine, the anchor of the monarchy's next era. Section 5, Catherine's stability and the monarchy's anchor. As speculation swirls around Meghan, palace strategy, and Prince William's growing influence, one figure quietly sits at the center of the monarchy's long-term stability: Catherine. Inside royal circles, Catherine is rarely discussed in dramatic terms, and that, insiders say, is exactly the point. She doesn't provoke headlines. She doesn't fuel controversy. She doesn't compete for attention. Instead, she anchors. Over the past year, observers have noted a subtle but meaningful evolution in her public role. Her appearances feel more deliberate. Her positioning alongside William appears more central. Her symbolism within royal imagery has become more pronounced, not as a side presence, but as a pillar of continuity. Where she was once framed primarily as supportive, she is now increasingly viewed as essential. One senior royal commentator described it simply: William represents the future of the crown. Catherine represents its stability. That distinction matters in the context of current speculation, because any discussion about proximity to William inevitably intersects with Catherine, and that intersection is tightly managed. Royal watchers often note how comparisons between Catherine and Meghan resurfaced during moments of heightened media attention. Fashion, tone, motherhood, public messaging. Parallels are drawn, comment sections ignite, headlines subtly frame contrasts. But insiders insist that within palace walls, there is little appetite for rivalry. Catherine, they say, is not perceived as threatened. Her authority doesn't come from reaction. It comes from consistency, discipline, and alignment with institutional priorities built over years. As one historian put it, she has done the long work, and the monarchy rewards the long work. That's why Catherine's role is often described as preventative rather than reactive. Instead of responding to speculation, she reinforces clarity about roles, hierarchy, tone, and direction. Her presence helps remove ambiguity. And ambiguity, in royal logic, is dangerous. According to sources familiar with palace operations, Catherine's public positioning is now treated as a form of narrative signaling. Joint appearances with William, carefully framed engagements, visual storytelling built around partnership, stability, and inevitability. One former communications advisor called it architecture, not accidental, not emotional, designed. From this perspective, Catherine serves as what one insider described as a human boundary marker. Her visibility simplifies the story the monarchy wants the public to understand. The future is settled, the structure is clear, the path is defined. That clarity leaves little room for reinterpretation, which is why speculation about Meghan's potential return, fair or unfair, is often filtered through Catherine's symbolic role. It's not about competition. It's about predictability versus unpredictability. Catherine represents known quantities, measure behavior. Institutional fluency, narrative stability. Meghan, by contrast, is viewed, rightly or wrongly, as a variable, adaptive, media-savvy, capable of shifting tone and attention quickly. And institutions, by nature, distrust variables, not because variables are dangerous, but because they are harder to control. So as William steps more firmly into his role as future monarch, Catherine's presence grows more central, not as a reaction speculation, but as reinforcement of a long-term strategy. The message being projected is quiet but firm. The future is already spoken for. No confrontation, no public rebuttals, no dramatic exclusions. Just consistency, repeated until it becomes unquestionable. And in a system built on time, repetition, and symbolism, consistency eventually becomes power. Power, perception, and the quiet battle ahead. In the end, this story isn't really about a single return, a single rumor, or even a single person. It's about systems. How institutions protect themselves. How power reshapes priorities. How perception can matter more than intention. The monarchy isn't preparing for drama. It's preparing for interpretation. Not reacting to what Meghan might do, but preempting what her presence might suggest. Because in a world where images travel faster than facts, narrative becomes influence, and influence left unchecked can reshape public memory. William represents inevitability. Catherine represents stability. Meghan represents narrative agility. Everyone understands the stakes, and everyone is watching. No announcements no confirmed returns no public moves. Just anticipation. And as history often shows, the most consequential conflicts don't begin with action. They begin with perception. If you found this breakdown insightful, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the next chapter of the story doesn't start in Britain, it starts years earlier, with a pattern many believe they've seen before.